Hello, everyone. Been insanely busy lately, but it has been absolutely fantastic. Very much loving it. I've been writing my new book and working and running around and enjoying the summer. So, if anyone's watching, thank you so much for the patience. And today we are going to jump into chapter 15. So then, 15. The Long Sail. Within the month, they returned to Miklagard and settled their return. What little spoil was taken from the bandits was stored, but that had not been the command's intention in those lands. The raiders themselves, yes, but not the command. Harold Sigurdsson walked the streets of the great mother city Miklagard, this city with as many names as there have been rulers in the palace. For certainly every emperor had ruled a different city. He wondered at how lonely a place it must be to rule at the peak of this Eastern Roman Empire. The king has no friends, for without friends, he will never be betrayed. The commander of the Varangian Guard of the Roman Empire stood on a terrace somewhere in the city. He looked up the long distance to his left and saw the Hagia Sophia rising up into the air, its spires looking like towers to heaven. How lonely must it be, the king? By the god he wanted to rule. Nothing in all his life had ever satisfied like the thought of being king. King Harold of Norway. What a title that would make. How great he'd be. His fame and power, his wealth and the battle wolves he'd command. Miklagard was nothing. This ancient and secret city at the center of the earthly power on Earth was meaningless. If the emperor offered to abdicate in favor of Harold and that he could rule this sea and marry Zoe and be the greatest Roman emperor in history, he'd accept, only to auction the title off and pursue his real goal, his home. His fucking throne lay elsewhere. How good it would be to be the king. Lord Harold, he heard, and slowed in his walk. He looked behind to see who it was that had been called, fearing nothing. With him were 12 Varangian guard of the city as his retainers. They were armed to an unnecessary excess and wore the heaviest and best made armor. Every Varangian knew that if you volunteered to be Harold's retainer, when he went out, you'd have to douse yourself in water numerous times to keep from heating over to death. Hundreds asked for the honor every day. Who is there? Who comes before his lord? He asked, walking through the rows of his men and standing tall and proud before the Varangian who came before him now. Lord, I wanted to ken when we might be going back north, Lord. If we might, the man asked in his strange accent. But pay your ware guild and you can have leave to go any time, warrior. What is your name? I am Ragnar Lord. And why might you be so interested in heading north now? Do the spoils of this world no longer suffice? Or have you attained the fortune you wish? In truth, Lord, I tithe out much of my earnings to the church, but that's not it. I've had a report from home. I have heard that our good King Duncan had been killed, Lord. Your king is dead. Would that mean the throne in England? Scotland! Duncan was King of Scots, Ragnar said, putting a finger up to make his point. Harold leaned toward him. The man grabbed the hand. All's well. Calm yourself. What? Have you a claim to this crown? But what I've heard, the crown now sits upon the head of a thane there called Macbeth. Aye. And would you go to avenge this Duncan, or to serve this brave Macbeth? Neither, Lord. I'd go only to make certain my homestead is well kept. The changing of a king can be an ugly business. Harold nodded. I see. This I can understand, but you ought know we are not bound for home yet. There is still much plunder and fame to be had here. Go if you must. He leaned in to the man and spoke in his ear. In fact, to aid in your flight, I'd not exact anywhere guild of you. I remember putting honors to you at Jordan. That was you there before me. And what is more, is your Christian charity is godly and well. Thank you, Lord, Ragnar said with a tear in his eye. I ken what me home shall look like when I see it again. Perhaps what you need, prepare what you need. Have your weregild question put to my name, and I'll answer for it. I know not, however, when a new boat shall head to the north from here. If you have enough gathered together to buy one, you are, however, more than welcomed. Go in the grace of our Lord Christ, friend. Know also, you have time to think on this, and that no decision made rash would ever be done made well, even if it was the right course. This gave Ragnar's frantic breathing a steady moment. Aye, that is wise. Thank you again for the offer you have made me. I'll attend my prayers. On this I must pray for guidance. Harold put a hand on the man's shoulders and pushed him gently out of his way, then turned and walked away, his men letting him through and then turning to follow him as he continued through the city. From there, he made for a bazaar to get something to eat. He loved the feeling of walking around the city in the company of his guards. His wealth was well known, and many paid him great respect. He, or rather, paid good regard to his money. In the marketplace, which received the traded goods mostly from Italy, he saw many of his warriors sitting at tables and trading with the local kiosks. His men in this city, actively being a part of it. He suddenly saw all the wealth they'd taken from the pirates and bandits and Circulander enemy being distributed here in Miklagard. This was the real tithe, he realized all at once. His men earned great wealth, raiding and pillaging throughout these lands, but they had nowhere to spend it other than here. Of course, many spent much of the loot, sentiment of the loot home, but much was kept for themselves and with themselves, and spent it here. How clever you are, Michael. The king always wins. He smiled and laughed at the idea. He stood at the center of the bazaar. This marketplace was enormous. Harold felt like he was surrounded by a shield wall of trusted warriors, friends. To his left, he saw a man walking out of a shaded alleyway. In order to exit, he even pushed aside a canvas drape. The man was clearly Varangian, but he wore a long robe like he was a resident of Miklagard. Even his shoes were the commonly used comfortable slipper-looking things. The sight of this clandestine exit intrigued Harold. He and his men were not seen by the man as he made for the road to his right, and so he thought himself not overt in watching. Come on, I'm seeing what that is. His retainers all followed, fanning out like a thin spearhead wedge, with he as the tip. He approached the flap in the wall of the bazaar and instantly was blocked the way by a pair of big Byzantine men. Harold appraised them with a smile. They came out of nowhere and were powerfully muscular. Do you speak my tongue? He asked. They didn't seem to understand. Instead, they spoke in Greek. You aren't allowed in here now, the man said in Greek. He spoke slowly enough for Harold to understand him. In where? He asked. In here, the other man said, clearly surprised at Harold's ability in the language. Do you want to be Varangian? He asked, looking back and forth between them. You both have the look of bears on you. Well, what do you think? Look not so stunned. Look, then, without that look on your face at me. Berserkir! Could not you be men of great power and strength to me? Is that the commander? Asked a bewildered voice from behind the curtain. Harold widened his eyes in recognition. Helgi? What are you doing in there? Come talk to these men. They are standing in my way. Stefan Castinov, stand aside and let him through. It is not only him, the one who'd nodded at the name Stefan said back. Helgi pushed through the curtain then. A tall blonde woman in her 40s went straight to Harold and they embraced. Their embrace was mostly them body slamming each other. Whole retinue, is it? How did you hear of this place? She put up her hands apologetically. Not that we were trying to have this place hidden from you. What the hell is it? I saw one of ours coming out of here. Suddenly, Helgi looked around. There is too much attention we could be bringing here. There's room for only two more. You and a man of yours. Knut, he said loudly without turning or hesitating. Told you all, did I not? One of the retainers said and put his left arm to show off the muscles, though he was well padded in a gambeson. Best among his guard. Shut up, a woman said, shoving him. He knows you are dumb enough to forget what you see there. Another said, pushing Knut as well. Envy looks ugly in all your bearings, he said, laughing. The rest of you are to remain in the marketplace. Get drink and watch the door. Too many come too fast, you come in. Don't draw attention. All I do is draw attention, another said, and they laughed at her. The 11 others did as they were bidden, of course, laughing and shoving each other as they found places to carry out this bidding. Now then, what kind of secretive crimes are we carrying out here? Beyond the canvas, there was a narrow path between two mud-stone walls. Above them were thick wooden beams that lay across the way. Helgi led as Harold and Knut followed down the alleyway, but Harold was not satisfied with this. He knew there'd be few places to actually go, so he put his arm out and passed Helgi on her left. She only laughed. At the end of the alley were two doors, one into the wall to the left and one in face of them. Harold put a hand on the door straight ahead, reasoning that the one to the left would have access to the building that had already had an entrance from the bazaar. Wrong door, Lord, Helgi said. He closed his eyes and rolled his head back. Cannot be right all the time, he said through clenched teeth. He then opened the door, pushing them into the room. Well, he said, eyes wide as he stood at the threshold. This is completely not what I was expecting. He looked around the room at dozens of Varangians sitting at tables drinking, and many bare-breasted women walking around and serving them. You should sit. There's a table set there, Helgi said, pointing out an empty table. Everyone in the room saw now who had come, and many cups were raised to his greeting. Hail! He heard it from around the room. I think I'll sit with these ones, he said, walking up to a table where two men sat already and taking an available seat. The men sitting there looked at him and sat back. Who the fuck dares to sit at my table? He asked loudly. Just some beggar coming off the street. Knut sat and was not listening. He was looking around at all the women lustily. In such fine clothing as this? For indeed, Harold was well dressed in a fine jacket and wore many jewels upon his fingers and around his neck. Drink, asked a serving woman who'd come to his side. She put her hand upon his shoulder and rested her hip against his arm. And what is this? A brothel? Are these whores? Harold asked. The woman took her hand from his shoulder and slapped him across the face. Harold sat stunned for a moment while the room laughed. I like this place. Welcome to the long sail, they at the table said. The long sail? That's not so good a name. Who has made this place? That was all of us. You are called Dorvind, if I remember it well. I am Lord. I told you my name is Sicily. Harold shrugged, putting his hands out to the sides. Just as he did, an earthenware cup was put into his hand. He looked over to it. I have special memory for some names, he said, then smelled the drink then. His eyes grew hungry, and he took a great drink from it, draining half the cup. Mead! Excellent! Brute right here, Dorvin said. We gathered together money from our raiding, bought this place. Then we took barrels and honey from trade, and Werand is our brewer. He is an artist with the making of mead. Hail, a man said from the back. Hail to you, mead make, Harold said, raising a cup. Hey, I make it too, Helgi protested. Much of the batch is my make. Then hail to you as well, I say. Who else is here? Let me see. He looked around at the seated. Eifert, Drogon, Dorir, Dragi, Terik, Porg, Svein, Erik, Eowerd, Helgi, Harald. Your name is easy for me always. Knut, Malfred, Sten, Inga, Hafald, Bodil, Olaf. I think I have not missed any. The whole room fell quiet as he named the faces he could see. Well done, Dorfin said. Of course you shall remember my name. How is your leg going? Healed? This is helping. He laughed. And what is my name? He asked, standing and holding up his cup. Commander, said Molfrid. What is my name? He said again, standing and taking big strides around the room. Harold, many said. What? Harold, they all said together. He finished the cup of mead then. Skull. Another! He threw the cup to an unimpressed-looking woman. By the God, I love drinking too much. Skål! He called, and they all answered. Harold then sat back at the table he'd chosen first, and another drink was brought to him. He brought nomisma, silver coin, out of it, and offered them to the woman, who took them with a laugh. Suppose they are already paid and I didn't need to do that. Lord, Sten said. He was the man who sat with Dorvind. I think we all want to know. Where are we going next? Where shall the axe fall? Harold drank again. The Emperor, this Michael IV, has a campaign for us to go on to. We are to go fight with the Bulgars in the north. On a campaign? The Varangian mercenaries, then? What of the sailing Varangian? I am of the mercenary. I will be going to the land of the Bulgars, said Drogon. And then? What of the sailing Varings? Asked Inga. You are to continue your battling with the pirates. There are, I am sure, many pirate lairs and ships who have in their hold much loot that by right should be in your stock. This you will rectify. The Emperor's seat will never be without pirates, friend. Your campaign there is not done. We go to fight against the Bulgars. To what end? Are they rebelling there? Asked Thorir, a man of short stature but strong build. Harold sat back and closed his eyes, then looked up at the ceiling. Who here is my best killer? He asked. Who among you fine Varangian would call themselves the best with a sword and axe and knife? They all looked around at each other. I do, Hafvald said. I do, said Thorir eagerly. No, Harold said with all the gravel his voice could muster. Not you. You who ask to what end. That is not what a killer would ask. Killers do not ask to what end. What do killers ask, Hafvald? He said loudly, still to the ceiling. Nothing but the kill. Harold laughed. The scald's tongue to go with the arm of a warrior. That's true, Inga added enthusiastically, and all laughed. Thorir was looking down onto the table, chastened. I only wanted to know why we'd go warring in the land. Harold's eyes turned to the man sitting at a table over. Because! He stood and walked around the table as dramatically as he could. He had the attention of the whole tavern, and delighted that he'd done so. He walked slowly to where the man sat and stopped before him, but did not look upon him. Because it is what we all fucking are. We are not in this part of the world to find out who we are or what we fucking are. We are here to be who we've always been. We kill, we fight, we raid, and we fucking kill. Harold planted his foot on Thorir's chest and looked down on him. Or we die! He pushed him over. For his part, the man Thorir did try to hold on to the foot as he was pushed, but he didn't manage to grab hold of it, and so crashed to the floor. He recovered quickly, rolling back and catching himself in a crouch. He panted now in the panic of his attack. Harold only stood over him. Do you want to fight in the land of the Bulgars? Harold asked. Thorir only stood up and wavered. Yes? He asked. Harold shook his head. Go home. Go back north. You're no Varangian. Lord, he shares in the owning of this place, same as we, paid for from his own stock of plunder. There is only room for strength among my Varangian. I saw only weakness here. I will not fight next to one who'd ask such things. The whole tavern had gone quiet. The serving women all stood in transfixed surprise at the outburst in behavior. Thorir continued to breathe heavily at the treatment and stared hatefully straight at Harold. Would you defend me in the shield wall? Or would you ask why we are there? I need killers who'd fight for no reason other than that it is the fight. Then I'll fight, he said and leaped forward. A look of sheer joy erupted in Harold's expression, and he braced for the attack. Thorir, no! The man who'd been called Eifert yelled. Harold pivoted to the side and met the man's charge with his shoulder. Thorir swung with the right hook and caught Harold unaware and sent him sprawling. Getting punched was not fun, and Harold landed on the table to steady himself with a grimace. He spat on the floor and faced the man. Thorir stepped forward and swung with his left. Harold ducked the swing and planted his own fist squarely in the man's ribs, making him grunt again. This he did not let sit a moment, as he immediately threw his fist up and caught the man's chin, sending him back. Gah, bastard! Thorir said, shaking off the blow. This is good, Harold thought. They need to know the right kind of fear. That is the thing all armies need of their commander. Let them know me, respect me, love me, but let them all know they have the right idea to fear me. Harold pulled a knife from the sheath under his belt and held it in reverse grip. Come and fight! The man had a knife himself, Harold had seen, and he hesitated a moment. So unutterably weak, he thought. Finally, he pulled his own knife and stood in an unsure fighting stance. Harold could see the interplay going on in the man's mind. Am I really having a knife fight with my lord the commander? Does he want to kill me? Should I try and kill him? There will never be any room for doubt in my fucking kingdom. You are either committed or you are cast out. You have to choose which thing you want every moment. Every time you awake, you have to make the decision. Rise and fight to keep this life you love so much, or let yourself plunge down to the darkness, allow death, or choose life. Those are your options. If you are unsure, then come and die on this blade now. Go to Valhalla by the blade of the great Harald. Come on, man. What is it? He held the knife out before him as he spoke, aiming for the man's heart. I don't want to go home. Why? There you are safe and warm and clean. There you have all those things and are never threatened by anything. That is where doubt will put you until it eats away at all you are and withers you to the shame of years until you die a weak coward. Is that what you want? Do you want to die? No. Come and die by my blade if you doubt my cause. I'll never die. Thorir took a step forward. Then what will you do now? He asked, still holding the blade out toward the man. Harold was ready to kill him if he needed to. He would execute him, right here in front of everyone. Thorir clenched his teeth and stepped forward. He walked up to the knife and placed his neck against it. I would live and fight for Harold Sigurdsson. So the question now is, would you have me? Harold smiled. He saw no fear in the man's eye. He turned the knife blade up and then slashed a shallow line along the man's jaw, making him yell in surprise, pain, and recoil. Holding his chin, you show you are learning. Let that remind you of the oath you have taken here today. Thorir Cutjaw. That I call you. He looked around at all None showed a hint of disapproval. Cutjaw, said another. Another said after him. Let us share more a drink, then. This mead is like heaven's own rains. Get me a horn and some fucking bandage, Cutjaw said, still holding his chin. He spoke through clenched teeth, as moving his mouth too much hurt. Quite a lot. Crazy son of a bitch! He breathed quietly enough that none heard him. What of you, half-falled? Who stands and calls himself my best killer? Will you join in with the mercenary to come to the Bulgalander? Of course I will. There is much we can take in these lands. Certainly we must go. Good men you are. Now, I will tell for why we're going on this quest into the Bulgalander. Let me tell to you a story, a time when the changing of kings, to quote a friend, will make the seas hereabout shake and boil. Huffeld and Inga looked at each other, fairly certain who he referenced, and who would not appreciate being called friend by this man. The Emperor called me to him to meet in council. This is well known among the people, but I think it's best to confirm what you have heard to come from me. The Emperor is dying. He falls to fits often, and his flesh is swollen upon his body. Some may know, too, that he has a nephew, named also Michael, who he adopted and has called his successor, though the boy is loved little compared to his half-brother. Less by me than that, I think. But whatever else I think, the boy is named and the Emperor is ailing, close to a time when he shifts of power will come in these foreign lands. In this state, Michael summoned me and held my counsel. He will be dead soon, and I think it for this reason he has called a campaign into these lands of the Bulgars, for they are now in open revolt to flout against his power. He wishes to respond swiftly, rashly, and violently. He looked around at all who listened to him closely. And personally, there was further a quiet among them now. Harold nodded. Yes, he, the Emperor Michael IV himself, is coming with us to destroy the rebels. Some last glory in this life to attain before he is certain his death is on him. We go to root, to raise, to raid, to render verdict against these enemy and to reduce their empire that employs us ever again. To resist this empire that employs us ever again. That will be our course, and we go with the imperial procession. I shall sit in council with the Emperor and make for him a strategy for his victory. This I shall do, and you shall all come with me. He turned to Thorir Cutjaw. You, I will have as my service guard. This fate you cannot escape now, Cutjaw. Are you ready? Thorir had been given some bandages and pressed it to the wound. He looked at Harold with fire light in his eyes. My readiness is made for me by the gods. My fate is set, and I'll be your man as long as you need me. Good! You have much to learn. I almost had to kill you. Make certain I am gladdened that I did not, for I know not if I'll be able to spare you again. It was no crime you committed, but I am prepared always to cut away a line that drags at my longship. Do not make me cut deeper, Cutjaw. When your service is considered by me to be sufficient and well made, then I shall learn what else to call you. He shook his head. Fuck you, Commander. He nodded his respect. Getting closer. We march on the morrow. We go to the west and make the Bulgars burn. Quite a chapter. I loved writing of Harold Sigurdsson. I loved writing of this brash, ebullient man who was so constantly displeased with everything, so utterly displeased with the grandeur, splendor, fame, glory, wealth, everything he had. He was so constantly displeased, for it wasn't what he wanted. In reading the saga of Harold Sigurdsson, I learned of a man who was so focused, so single-minded on that throne in Norway. He wanted nothing more than to recreate his uncle's place of the great North Sea Empire. He wanted it to be real, to be his. He wanted to be king of all the world. But to him, the world was Scandinavia and England, including England, Scotland if he could have it. He'd take parts of Francia too, and Ireland. He'd have everything. He wanted what his uncle had, and then he wanted more. So much more. Just constantly more. And I love that approach to life. I love it. Do not settle for less. Fight and earn and strive and continue for more, because you fucking deserve it if you but fight for it. Be great, my friends. And until next time.